I'm probably going to take all of the fun out of this conversation, but let's talk about the great American novel. At a time where a lot of the news and the articles that have come out have bemoaned the state of reading and talked about the decline in our quality of reading and our habits, the Department of Education being dismantled before our eyes. If the great American novel is ever chosen, who's going to be around to read it? So I recently watched this video from Jack Edwards, and it was all on the great American novel. And, after instinctively shouting my own personal takes at the screen over and over again, I paused and I got to thinking, what exactly is America's obsession with the word great? From our novels to political slogans to just about anything we do, whether it's from the talent we have and the talent we export around the world, or if it's even our sad girl era that just happens to affect the entire global economy. We are obsessed with being great. Before we get into it though, my name is Dominique. I'm a reader and a writer, and this is my space for documenting my journey to becoming a published author. You can find me on all socials here, and if you're new here, go ahead and give that subscribe button a tap and the like button if you feel so inclined. So in his fantastic video essay, Jack talks about the great American novel, and I think he was inspired by this LitHub article that came out. And the great American novel is this term that was coined by John William DeForest. And it was just, around the time that America was building and developing its own national literature. And at this time, I believe Moby Dick was a title, and Scarlet Letter, Uncle Tom's Cabin. These were all titles that were in the canon already. But he said at the time, and this was 1868, that the great American novel had not been written yet. And I guess he just knew that, given the titles that I've just listed.
This is all just beginning.
While there hasn't been any consensus on which title deserves the crown, and it's been over 150 years, and the titles have to meet this criteria, authors like Toni Morrison, Harper Lee, Mark Twain, they've all been considered contenders. And for me, my personal nomination has to be E.L. Doctorow's Ragtime, because I think that it matches all of it. It's democratic in form and spirit. It is very elaborative and covers all of America. E.L. Doctorow's American, and I believe that it might have been popular when it was published, but I don't really hear that many people talk about it now. That is still my nomination, and I'm standing 10 toes behind it. But in this video, I'm not really going to talk about the titles that deserve to be on the list, and I'm not even going to really focus on this idea of America's or American exceptionalism, because I really don't think exceptionalism is that unique to the American experience. I do agree that we might be the loudest about it, and that can be its own conversation. But as an American bibliophile, I think it's my patriotic duty to the stars, stripes, and shelves to just discuss the paradox of greatness in this literary context. And I want to talk about this very necessary component to there ever being a great American novel, because if we're going to have a great American novel, we're going to need great writers. And if we're going to have great writers, what do they need to be and to have? Great readers. The dictionary defines great as of an extent, amount, or intensity considerably above the normal or average, of ability, quality, or eminence considerably above the normal or average. Speaking of averages, I want to quickly mention some averages and statistics that I will refer to a bit later in the video. In 2024, approximately 79% of American adults were considered literate. Of that 79%, only 54% were considered to have a reading average that was at best at a 6th grade level. And while 2024 reported an increase of Americans who reported to have at least read one book in the last year, other reports and trends show it hasn't necessarily been as promising an improvement as the numbers appear to bear. There's still been this troubling pattern in American reading habits that should concern all of us.
1775?
When we cut ties with Great Britain, America, got about the business of building its sense of self and its mythology, its autonomy and its authorship at the same time. And the structure in which we were building all of this was democracy. And I'm not sure in the history of civilizations how many other democratic societies have been as cognizant of building its legacy at the same moment of its inception. America really was very,
my manifest destiny!
We're going to defend our borders and we're going to define our soul. Therefore, this may not be unique to America, but it is indicative of the grip that greatness has had on our collective imagination. So I'm fascinated by the extent to which greatness has been projected out to the masses and has sort of infiltrated the very idea of who gets to be great and who gets to do great things, while at the same time, the thing that democracy needs in order to function, in order to even attempt greatness, is education. And I'm not so sure that America has shown up for the education of its population in the same way. Because just as America was, defining its soul and defining its greatness and trying to establish it, the system in which we were building democracy was slavery. And the thing about slavery in America is that it became integral to the mythology, and it became, the major pillar, the component that allowed America to pursue this greatness. And do you know what came out of slavery that is only unique to the United States? Anti-literacy laws. States like Georgia, Mississippi, North and South Carolina, Virginia, all codified and made it punishable by fines or imprisonment the very act of teaching an enslaved person to read and write, because it was believed that literacy might incite insurrection, rebellion, or worse, threaten the financial establishment. And once America got a taste of some prosperity, they weren't about to let some abolitionists or people talking about human rights interrupt, that financial train that had already left the station. And I think sometimes we believe that the horrors of our past are just that, in the past, but we neglect the ways that it continues to show up in our society. And of course, Black Americans know what it is to be denied literacy. We know it through these anti-literacy laws, and we know it through the under-resourced and underfunded schools that Black students have predominantly gone to. But now, more Americans are waking up and witnessing that keeping a class of people undereducated wasn't just about race. It was something that was embedded and necessary in the fabric of our system. And in order for America to become great, to make greatness the ethos. And I don't think it has to be as overt as anti-literacy laws, but I do think that literary discouragement shows up in other ways. So something that I've done a considerable amount of research on is the No Child Left Behind Act. And this was a education law that encouraged numbers over understanding. And at the time that this policy was enacted, a lot of schools were facing the threat of closure if they didn't improve their numbers and their test scores over a certain amount of time. And so a lot of teachers were incentivized to either cheat the test or just teach their students to the test. And so students weren't required to do any sort of critical thinking anymore. Reading comprehension started to take the back seat, and they just needed their students to perform at one particular moment. And then after that, their schools could stay open, staff could continue to have a job, and of course they would have a school that was open and available for students during the year. So the No Child Left Behind Act, I really do think that it began this really dangerous pattern and created a precedent of not valuing critical thinking skills or comprehension, or just encouraging all of what education is all about and reminding people of their educability. It just became, it's about this one performance, and once you've done this performance, we'll graduate you to the next level. And of course, this is all exacerbated because of the tech that we've now seen that's been rising, and we're all incentivized to just remain in our echo chambers, and no one's actually challenged on their ideas anymore. And I don't even think we know how to be challenged on our ideas without feeling as if we're being attacked, or feeling as if, oh, this person is trying to cancel me, or whatever it is. And I do believe that this is part of a grand scheme that's been an attack on public schools. And we're seeing now so many teachers that are leaving their positions, and parents that don't trust public schools anymore. And so they're opting out for homeschooling, or they're actually sending their kids to charter schools. And then there's the rise in charter schools and private schools over the last 20 years. And now that we have this administration that is in power and, defunding the Department of Education and dismantling all of these educational guardrails that we've tried to put up to ensure that we have a robust public education system, it almost feels as if we're in a very precarious moment for our educational system. And, with the book ban, there's so many things. There's like the book banning that's going on, and people burning books, and just, it's really sad to see, but it just reminds me that as much as we want to be great and we want to perform greatness, we don't want people to read or know about all of the ways that we're not. And of course, it is not just these external powers that have the greatest influence on reading habits. It's personal responsibility as well. And you might be saying, oh, what about booktube BookTube and Book Talk and all of these celebrity book clubs that exist now, and even the idea of talking about the great American novel makes it sound as if we have a robust literary community and that reading is still very much at the forefront of a lot of our culture and our society. But as I said, a majority of American adults are reading below a sixth grade reading level. And last year in particular, we were hit with a deluge of articles about this very thing. There were students that were showing up to elite colleges and they had never been required to read an entire book for a class. And, they were overwhelmed when their professors would require that they read a novel perhaps a week or a month. And they were like, yeah, I've never done this, because in school they only had to read passages and, they got to read little snippets and things like that. We were also hit with the quality of reading that people are doing. I know that it's a bit of a touchy subject because there is such a huge saturation of a certain type of book. And someone made a really great point that a lot of the reading that people are doing now is because of how much reading they had done on apps like Wattpad. And so everyone kind of got conditioned to reading perhaps unedited or unpolished manuscripts. And so they're not actually reading for any sort of literary substance. And I've even seen recently that people have claimed to not read paragraphs. They just read the dialogue, or people that will say after they've read a novel, how are you guys reading and remembering what you just read? Because as soon as I close the book, I can't remember characters and I can't remember the plot or anything like that. And I'm like, then what did you do? Like when you were, turning the page, were you literally just giving your wrist a workout, or were you actually connecting the words on the page to your thoughts and actually creating the imagery? And it's very, very concerning to hear what readers are saying now about literature. And it's not to the point that I believe everyone needs to read, like 12 to 24 more novels a year. Even if someone took a year to read one book and it was something that they spent their time with and they got the full context of whatever the story is and they could understand the characters and everything. I think I'm more concerned with this versus it just being a numbers game and hitting a certain target every single month or a quota every year, because it isn't about the numbers. With literature, it's about the comprehension, it's about the critical thinking skills, it's about the empathy that you develop. And I fear this is the thing that we're losing, because with Book Talk and with BookTube and all of these different platforms that are allowing readers and literature to have a moment, it's just based on the performance. But the performance of literature doesn't equate to literacy. And it's the literacy that matters the most in this conversation. And of course, we cannot have a conversation without the men, because the men are also not reading fiction anymore. There have also been all of these articles that are talking about the decline in white male novels, and white men aren't writing anymore, or that they're just not reading fiction. And it's so fascinating to me, because as much as there's been this huge push to diversify publishing and to get more authors of color and women and the LGBTQ community, it seems like there's been a rise in these kinds of voices in literature, but then there aren't any white men in it anymore. And now it's a moment of concern. And I just feel like there's also this loneliness epidemic that they've got going on. And I know that when I feel lonely and I pick up a good novel, the loneliness just it just goes away. It just slips to the wayside. So I'm just saying, pluck it. But the point of this video is not to be judgmental or to be, judgmental. But I guess my main point is that if we are to have a great American novel, who's going to read it? Reading, literacy, I think it's still a crucial component to adult life. And even if it's not your hobby, it's not your moment for relaxation or your pleasure or anything like that, I still think that it's an activity that's worthwhile because of the quality of life that it offers us. I think it offers us something that we're watching atrophy in real time, and this push for greatness. can't actually be sustained without it. Let me know if you see this paradox, if I've just, ruined the fun conversation and I've become the Debbie Downer at the party where we were just supposed to choose a title out of a hat. And you can also let me know if you think that there are specific titles that you definitely know deserve to be on the list. Maybe there's not just one great American novel, but there's going to be a very democratic Mount Rushmore of titles that definitely deserve to be up there and crowned with quite a heavy crown, a very heavy title. Really sorry if I did take all of the fun out of the conversation, but I really appreciate you being here. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Now I finally have time to do what I've always wanted, write the great American novel.